Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My dear students, today we have the complement of reviewing the principles of the grammar translation method. In the previous lecture, we started the discussion of the grammar translation method, which can also be known as the classical method. It is one of the oldest methods used to teach English as a foreign language, which emphasizes the student's ability to read the literature of the target language, to read and write the literary works of the target language, and to have some knowledge about the culture of the target language. We started the discussion looking at some of the ideas observed in the lesson conducted according to the grammar translation method. Then we have explained the principles and observations which are related to the lesson conducted according to the grammar translation method. In reviewing the principles, the first idea that we started with was the goals of the teacher who uses the grammar translation method. The teacher's aim is to develop students' ability to read and write passages written in the target language, at the same time to have the ability to translate these passages from the target language to the native language or from one language into another. Then we talked about the teacher role and the learner role. We mentioned that the grammar translation method is a teacher-dominated method in which most of the activity is done by the teacher who directs and controls the students, and the students only respond to and learn what the teacher introduces. Then we have a summary to the most important characteristics of teaching and learning process according to the grammar translation method, in which we mentioned the emphasis upon written language, the emphasis upon knowledge and memorization of vocabulary items, knowledge and memorization of grammatical structures. Now we start with item 4, which is related to the nature of students-teacher interaction and the nature of teacher-students interaction. In the classroom, during the process of language teaching, the interaction or the language is either directed from teacher to students or from students to the teacher or from students to students. We have different patterns of interaction in the classroom. So the nature of interaction is based upon the principles which are adopted in a particular method. According to the grammar translation method, we mentioned that it is a teacher-centered approach. The students are not required to use the target language in oral interaction. That's why we have most of the time teacher-students interaction. The interaction goes from the teacher to students. The students only follow what the teacher says. And we have only very little students interaction, students teacher interaction, which is directed from students to the teacher when they ask some questions. So in this case, the most important pattern of interaction is teacher-students interaction. Here we have the interaction either goes from individual students to the teacher, or from teacher to students, or from the whole class to the teacher, or from the whole class to other students. Or the students, we mean by students, we mean that the students are divided into groups and they interact with each other. The pattern of interaction, of course, selected according to the different aspects, according to the theoretical background, according to the objectives that we want to achieve. In the grammar translation method, we don't have the students use the target language to interact with the teacher or with each other. That's why The most common pattern of interaction is teacher to students. How is the language viewed and how is culture viewed? First, what is the way in which language is viewed according to the grammar translation method? From what we have mentioned previously, we understand the emphasis upon the language of literary works. That's why literary language is considered superior to spoken language and is therefore the language of the students' study. Language is viewed as the language of the literature of the target language, while culture is viewed as consisting of literature and fine arts. The students are supposed to understand the cultural aspects of the community of the target language by studying literature and fine arts of the target language. What areas of language are emphasized and what language skills are emphasized? We mentioned that we need to distinguish between language components and language skills. Language components include grammar, vocabulary, and phonology, while language skills include listening, speaking, reading, and writing. According to what we have mentioned previously, we can understand that knowledge of vocabulary items is very important and knowledge of grammatical structures is important. That's why we have both vocabulary and the grammar to be emphasized. Students' knowledge of vocabulary items and grammatical rules are emphasized and, let us say, given the priority. This is concerning the language areas or the language components, while in relation to language skills, it is very clear from our previous explanation that spoken language is not given any emphasis. The only medium of language which is emphasized is the written. That's why we have emphasis upon reading and writing only, reading and writing of parts or excerpts of literary texts. Reading and writing are the primary skills that students work on. There is much less attention given to speaking and listening. Pronunciation receives little, if any, attention. Of course, these questions are supposed to be answered in relation to all methods and approaches that we will study now, we are studying now or we will study in the future. So, this is something fixed that we should know in relation to each method. What is the role of a student's native language? When we teach English, we need to know exactly if the teacher or students are allowed to use the native language in the class or not. According to the grammar translation method, the student's native language is used during instruction in the class. So, when the teacher is asking the students to write the answer to comprehension questions, they write in the target language. But when he interacts with the students in the class, he uses the native language. The native language is used in the class mostly by the students and the teacher. How is evaluation accomplished? We mentioned that an important part of the process of teaching is evaluation. Teaching only is not enough, but we need evaluation in order to understand the extent to which students are making progress or they gain progress and achievement. That's why we need to evaluate students' performance. Students are evaluated according to their ability to read the literature of the target language and to translate passages from the target language to the native language. Written tests in which students are asked to translate from their native language into the target language or vice versa are often used. In this case, the students either translate from target to native language or from the native language to the target language. Questions about the target culture or questions that ask the students to apply grammar rules are also common. Also, we have questions that emphasize the ability to apply grammatical structures or questions about the culture of the target language, which are used to evaluate the students' progress and achievement. How does the teacher respond to students' errors? We talked about this. We mentioned that when students produce something incorrect, the teacher is the authority. Either the teacher asks another student to provide the correct answer. If the students cannot provide the correct answer, this correct answer is provided by the teacher. Now we finished with reviewing the principles. We have another idea, which is reviewing the techniques. The techniques which are used by the teacher in the classroom during a lesson conducted and according to grammar translation method. Number one, we have translation of literary passages. The students translate a reading passage from the target language into their native language. The reading passage provides the focus of several classes. Vocabulary and grammatical structures in the passage are studied in subsequent lessons. So first, the students are supposed to read the passage, read because we know the importance of reading. Second, the students are required to translate the passage because we know the importance of students' ability to translate from target language to the native language or vice versa. Then we have reference to vocabulary and the grammatical structures. The passage is part of a literary work from the target language literature. Or the teacher may write a passage carefully designed to include particular grammatical rules and vocabulary. Translation may be written or spoken or both. The students should not translate idioms and the like literally. They should only give the meaning uh, in a way that shows that they understand their meaning. So we don't have the students to translate idioms literally. Reading comprehension questions. We mentioned that written language is superior to spoken language according to the grammar translation method. That's why the students are supposed to answer reading comprehension questions, which are grouped into three groups. In the first group, the questions are related to the passage. In the second group, the questions are related or supposed to be answered by the students according to their understanding of the passage. And in the third group of comprehension questions, the questions are supposed to be related to the student's personal experience. So students answer questions in the target language based on their understanding of the reading passage. Often the questions are sequenced so that the first group of questions asks for information contained within the reading passage. In order to answer the second group of questions, the students will have to make inferences based on their understanding of the passage. This means they will have to answer questions about the passage even though the answers are not contained in the passage itself. The third group of questions requires the students to relate the passage to their own experience. Antonyms and synonyms. At the same time, the students are asked to give the meaning of words, either the same meaning or the opposite meaning. The students are given one set of words and are asked to find antonyms in the reading passage. A similar exercise could be done by asking students to find synonyms for a particular set of words. Our students might be asked to define a set of words based on their understanding of them as they occur in the reading passage. Other exercises that ask the students to work with the vocabulary of the passage are also possible. So it's very important to understand the meaning of the vocabulary items as they are used in the passage. That's why the students are supposed to know the meaning of the word or the opposite meaning of the word, and also they are asked to work within the vocabulary of the passage. Cognates, the students can make use of the similarities between the native language and the target language. So sometimes we have the idea of cognates, which includes words which are similar in form and meaning in the target language and the native language. For example, we have the word radio, bicycle, fax, which are used in similar form and meaning in English and Arabic. We can use them in a similar way, so the students can make use of the similarity between the two languages. That's why one of the techniques is the use of cognates. Students are taught to recognize cognates by learning the spelling or the sound patterns that correspond between the languages. Students are also asked to memorize words that look like cognates but have meanings in the target language that are different from those in the native language. So in this case, we have partial cognates in which the words are similar in form but different in meaning. This technique, of course, would only be useful in languages that share cognates. And if cognates are available, we can use such words to help the students to learn new vocabulary items. Deductive application of rules, we mentioned that we have two ways of explaining grammatical rules, deductive and inductive, and that the grammatical rules are explained deductively according to the grammar translation method. In this case, we have the teacher to start with rules, then the application of these rules with examples. Grammar rules are represented with examples. Exceptions to each rule are also noted. Once students understand a rule, they are asked to apply it to some different examples. So first, the students are supposed to understand the rule, to memorize it, and then to apply it to different examples. Fill in the blank and memorization can be used to refer to both grammar and vocabulary. So first, if we refer to fill in the blank, the students or the teacher can use this technique to make the students write the correct vocabulary items in the blanks or the correct grammatical structures. Students are given a series of sentences with words missing. They fill in the blank with the new vocabulary items or within items of particular grammar type, such as prepositions or verbs with different tenses. So in this case, when we have any exercise, we need to know why this exercise is used by the teacher to achieve what? To develop students' knowledge of grammar, to develop students' knowledge of vocabulary or pronunciation or any other idea. In this case, this exercise, fill in the blanks, is used to teach students both vocabulary and grammar. Memorization is used because we work according to faculty psychology, in which the students are supposed to do a lot of mental exercises in order to empower and enrich their minds to learn language successfully. That's why students are supposed to memorize grammatical rules, grammatical paradigms, as well as the memorization of vocabulary items. Use words in sentences. The students are supposed to practice using the new vocabulary items in sentences in order to show that the students understand the meaning and use of the new vocabulary items. So they make up sentences in which they use the new words. Composition, we mentioned that's very important to be able to know how to write in the target language. So this exercise is very important for the students according to the grammar translation method because the teacher is supposed to know the student's ability to write in the target language. The teacher gives the students a topic to write about in the target language. The topic is based upon some aspect of the reading passage of the lesson. Sometimes, instead of creating a composition, students are asked to prepare a précis of the reading passage. So, in this case, or in all cases, these students are supposed to be able to write. That's why this exercise is, or this technique is emphasized according to the grammar translation method. According to all what we have mentioned, number one, this method is one of the oldest methods. Number two, it is not based upon a linguistic theory or a well-developed psychological theory. At the same time, this method emphasizes the students' ability in written language only without giving any emphasis to pronunciation or spoken language or students' ability to use the target language in communication. The students are supposed to memorize grammatical structures and then apply them with examples. In this case, we expect a lot of weaknesses to be available in the grammar translation method. And here we have a number of drawbacks of the grammar translation method. The weaknesses or the points of criticism of the grammar translation method. There are many drawbacks to the grammar translation method. Number one, it teaches everything about the language rather than the language itself. The students learn vocabulary, grammar of the language, but they don't learn how to use the target language in interaction or communication when they speak. As a result, the students will not be able to speak the language fluently. So this method doesn't produce fluent speakers of the target language because the students are not supposed to practice speaking the language at all. They should only practice reading and writing at the same time translating from one language into another. Another point is that this method is too demanding for the students because they have to struggle with difficult text and compositions all the time. We mentioned that the students are supposed to do a lot of difficult exercises, memorize grammatical structures, memorize vocabulary items, and they have to read difficult text from literary passages. So, this is demanding for the students. The other point is that the grammar translation method emphasizes the written language at the sacrifice of the spoken language. So the spoken language is ignored and not given any emphasis, which is considered as a great weakness in any method of language teaching. Students are expected to learn the language first and only then start using it. That's why when we say that the students start memorizing the grammatical structures and then applying them to examples. So in this case, they should learn the language and then start using it. And even when they use it, they might use it only in a written form without referring to the use of language in a spoken form. The grammar translation method tries to teach language through conscious memorization of grammar rules and vocabulary, which is not regarded as an acceptable learning style nowadays. Of course, we can understand clearly that memorization is not a very successful technique in language learning, but now the students are supposed to practice language in real communication and real interaction, and then they will be able to use it. That's why these are the weaknesses or the points of a criticism to the grammar translation method. That's all for today, and thank you very much.